afternoon, and welcome to day two of our TMI series on mental health. So it's a talk series we started yesterday with talking about whether it's okay to open up about mental health at work. So we had AR here, who is a mental health advocate, but also someone who's been in the HR industry for quite a while as well. So I hope that we have some returning audience members, and I hope that you remembered everything that we talked about yesterday, right? So for those who are tuning in now and who weren't able to catch that yesterday, the video is still, of course, in the Liyab Career Support Group, so you can check that out. So, just to give a bit of background again as to why we're doing these talks, right? It's really just to participate in raising awareness on mental health, and to remind everyone that when it comes to mental health, there no information is too much information. So, again, whether that's at work, which we talked about yesterday, while job hunting, which we will be talking about today, or in school, which we'll talk about tomorrow, right? So for today, we'll talk about, what do I do when job hunting anxiety is starting to get to me? Some questions around this are like, how are our fresh grads doing? Do you feel that sometimes job hunting just gets all confusing and overwhelming? We send emails, we revise our resumes, we research on job boards on the internet, but still get rejected, and worse, even ghosted. I know some of you have felt that as well. And when we're in that situation, sometimes everything just seems to get to us. So how then do we take care of ourselves when that happens, right? How do we, preserve our grit, our esteem, our confidence that we've been building, just against all these rejections, and it really is, sometimes too much, right? So I've invited a friend of mine, Aliana, who I actually went to school with years ago in UP Diliman. So we were both psych majors there, but she also took her MA abroad in clinical psychology, and I'll let her give more information about herself. But let's all welcome Aliana and let's hear her talk first. All right.
All right. Thank you, Deirdre, for introducing me a little bit and also for inviting me to this. So I'm really excited to join this whole series. This is actually, I feel like, a really good initiative of Liyab to do this TMI series on mental health, especially because it is Mental Health Month as well. So, as she mentioned, I did my MS in clinical counseling psychology in Illinois State University. So I work now as a mental health therapist. Specifically, I work in St. Luke's Global City as a psychotherapist, and I'm also a psychosocial support specialist. Kind of a handful. There are a lot of words in UP Diliman. So I see a lot of clients and patients, but of course, because of this pandemic, it's all gone online now. I also do a lot of talks on mental health and also some research on the topic as well. So this is something I'm very passionate about talking. And so since I am coming from that mental health clinical psychology background, that's where I'm kind of like basing my perspective on. And in addition to that, I've also been in your shoes once, actually more than once, like been through a lot of anxious moments, a lot of downs, a lot of highs, mostly a lot of downs, the highs and lows, right, of the job hunt process. So that's where we'll be, where I'm coming from in terms of sharing that experience with you this afternoon. So what do we do, right, when the job hunt anxiety starts getting to us? So for today, I do want to be able to have three simple goals that could guide us in our talk today. So first, we want to be able to, again, talk about mental health. Specifically, first, I want us to define it. So really, really briefly defining it, just so that we have a definition on mental health that we can anchor ourselves on. And then we also want to be able to also see how the job hunt impacts our mental health, and then what we can actually do to take care of it. So that's kind of like the big chunk of what we want to be able to do here, is really find practical, actionable steps to be able to take care of our mental health while we're in this process of the job hunt. Okay, so first, what is mental health, right? So we hear this term a lot. I'm pretty sure the young people kind of are familiar with the definition of mental health. But again, just so that we're all on the same page here, I usually use the World Health Organization definition of mental health. So they define mental health as a state of well being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. So, as we can see, right, it's not just about the absence of mental disorders when we have mental health. It's actually just that general state of well being that you and I, everyone has, and should hopefully take care of. So if we're looking at it in the context of a job, it's really interesting because a lot of times, like mental health and having a job is actually somehow related. So if we're, for example, in a very fulfilling career, in a fulfilling job, a lot of times that positively impacts our mental health. So for example, we're employed in a job we're happy with. A lot of times, if we look at the definition and kind of like tear it apart, when we're in a job that we're happy in, we feel like we are realizing our potential. We feel like we can do certain things. We maybe that kind of like lessens our self doubts and we see what we can do. Maybe being in a job also gives us some economic, some social benefits that could help us in general, like cope with the stresses, the pressures of life. And then it just gives us an opportunity to be able to work productively and fruitfully, right? And we're able to contribute in general to society and the communities that we're in. So we can see that having a job, having an employer that we're happy with actually positively contributes to our mental health. And then so when we go to the other side of the coin, like what happens when we don't have a job, right? Maybe when we're unemployed or when we're in that grueling process of the job hunt, right? So that's what we want to look at next is how does the job hunt actually impact our mental health? So if we have some people listening in today that want to share some of the emotions that they're feeling, if you're probably job hunting right now, go ahead and comment that below. If you're a little too shy, that's okay. We welcome self-disclosure here. So go ahead and share if you have some experiences, whether this is something that you're experiencing now as something that you're going through, or maybe something that you have been through. It would be good to be able to maybe share some of the experiences you have, how the job hunt has or is continuing to impact your mental health. So go ahead and write those in the comments as I go through this section. So we can see here a word cloud of many of the different things that a lot of people experience during the job hunt. Even multiple people experience it. Even one person can experience all of these things. So just really random emotions that I put in here. So for example, if we're looking at just the reds in this cloud, we see, okay, financially burdensome, right? That's a big thing, especially in this pandemic right now, where we are feeling that impact of the financial economic aspect. And then sometimes the job hunt also gets quite boring and repetitive. Sometimes we feel like we're doing the same thing over and over again. So it does also impact our mental health that way. And then we also see that sometimes if we look at the other, we also have comparisons, right? So sometimes maybe we see our batchmates or our peers getting jobs faster than us or getting more high paying jobs than us. So then we kind of end up comparing ourselves to them in the process. If we look at maybe the pinks in this word cloud, we see that sometimes we feel like a failure, right? That comes up a lot. And then we also feel a lot of anxiety sometimes as well. Sometimes we feel like we're incompetent. And again, the envy comes out when we feel like people are doing a little better than us in the job hunt. Sometimes indecision also comes in. For example, you have a lot of choices. Let's say you have a lot of options there. Sometimes indecision actually comes in place as well. So there's really a lot of different things, right? So if any of these words resonate with you, go ahead and comment that as well if this is something that you feel like you've experienced or are experiencing as you're job hunting right now. Some other things, just to kind of read a couple more. The greens, we can look at the green words and phrases there. So there's a lot of waiting, right? A lot of waiting and a lot of worry that comes in when we're waiting as well. Sometimes we also have feelings of depression and just stress, and we feel very demotivated. Like sometimes our motivation gets affected when we are, feeling just really dejected a lot of times. And then if we look at the other things, like for example, the yellows, we feel unqualified, uncertain. If we look at the orange, we feel hopeless as well, worthless. Just a lot of rejections there. And then if we look at the blues, we have we feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. Like we feel very hopeless, and then sometimes we feel like we're not being productive, right? And that brings a lot of guilt as well. So really a lot of different emotions that many different people experience, and also us, we also experience that as well, as one person going through all of this. So I think we have a comment here. Yes, so Kimberly says that there are times that she'd feel demoralized because of the uncertainty of things. I like that word. Yes, it is the right term, I think. Demoralized does seem like it is what's happening, right? And I feel like especially now, because it's not just the job hunt. I mean, the job hunt in the Philippines, specifically the economy, the employment situation is already like competitive. It's already pretty hard to get through. And then we add the pandemic in, which just kind of doubles things up. So it is a lot harder, right? So there's different ways that we really do get affected. By this pandemic, this job hunt situation, right? So aside from these different emotions, sometimes our thoughts also get affected, right? So we have this author and professor, the Don Norris, who talks about job search depression. So depression is in quotes because we're not really talking about the clinical depression here. Basically, we're talking about that dip, that maybe low mood that we get when we are job hunting, right? So Don Norris says that usually that dip in mood, that low that we feel when we're job hunting, usually people attribute that to financial instability and frequent rejection. So a lot of times we feel like, okay, maybe it's because of the lack of money, and maybe it's because of the frequent rejections that we feel that depression, that quote unquote depression, right? But she says in her years of study and research that it turns out that identity is actually a much bigger piece of the puzzle. So while those things like rejection and instability still contribute to us feeling quite low and bad, identity actually plays a bigger part of that feeling of low that we get. So she specifically says that the distress comes from the perception that we are our work. So a lot of times we tie our identity so much to work. So that is so like intertwined. And then when we're job hunting, we actually receive constant messages that we aren't who we think we are. So somehow the job hunt, we're linking our identity so much to work. And then when we get a lot of rejections, a lot of ghosting, as Deirdre said earlier, then maybe that kind of like shakes up how we see ourselves, how our identity is. So that does make us feel that low, right? So earlier we had this word cloud of different emotions, different situations that we experience. And then we see here that our thoughts, our identity also kind of get messed up and like it gets affected really. Now, looking at the behaviors now, we have Dan Witters, who's a research director at Gallup. So they do a lot of research on like well-being and also like related to the employment situation. So he says that behaviorally or action-wise, going beyond just the emotions and the thoughts that we have, we actually go through this feedback mechanism when we're job hunting. So this feedback mechanism specifically, he says, okay, so the more that we don't have a job yet, so for example, we still don't have the prospects that we have, the more we feel like we don't deserve the downtime. So for example, okay, I don't have a job, so therefore I cannot rest. I can't take a break. I have to keep working overtime. I have to keep applying, keep being on the lookout for these jobs, and just really working day, night, to be able to secure that job, which in turn actually burns us out. So it makes us feel burnt out. And that feeling of burnout actually leads to a lot of isolation and negativity. So we feel negative emotions coming up, we feel negative thoughts as well. And a lot of times that negativity actually makes us isolate and we feel like we can't ask for help from other people. So in overall, adding all of those things up, it just becomes harder on our emotional health. So basically, our mental health gets negatively affected when we're not really giving ourselves some downtime. Now, he puts it in these words. Now, when things are harder on our emotional health, he says it's harder to actually chase down job leads and dazzle interviewers. I like his word there. It's harder to dazzle interviewers when we are, going through that kind of like maybe not so good mental health state, right? So basically, what he's saying here is that the more that we kind of like try to burn ourselves out, trying to find the job, a lot of times that is actually counterproductive to impressing employers, to dazzling interviewers, because then we're not really in that right mental health state to be able to just be productive, be in a good place when we're talking to them. So what this emphasizes is that maybe sometimes it's important to have that downtime, right? Maybe it's really important for us to take care of our mental health, because being able to take care of our mental health actually positively feedbacks into even our prospects of getting a job. So that's what we kind of want to emphasize here, that the job hunt does negatively impact our emotions and our thoughts, our identity, our behaviors as well. But there are things we can do, and that would also in turn help us have a better chance maybe of impressing interviewers and employers as well. So that's the second part that we want to talk about. Now, just to be able to really hone in on what do we do, right? So that this is what we kind of want to focus on. How do we actually take care of our mental health, given that it may negatively affect our mental health when we're going through that job hunting anxiety, right? So for this specific talk, I actually came up with an acronym that could guide our discussion today. So in the job hunt, as we saw earlier, it's actually important for us to remember to rest. Okay, so rest stands for reflecting, evaluating our thoughts, strategizing, and taking a breath. So that's what we want to be able to guide or anchor our discussion on today. So we'll go through each one by one, and hopefully all of these would resonate with you. And if there's something specific that maybe you feel like could connect with you, go ahead and comment that as well if you feel like that's something you could use and apply, all right, as we go through this whole thing. So first is to be able, again, to take care of our mental health, or the first step in what to do when we're experiencing this job hunting anxiety is to reflect. A lot of times when we are going through something, we get overwhelmed or consumed by the emotions that we have. Let's say we get a rejection. A lot of times what I hear from people is when they get rejections, they end up feeling kind of demotivated. They don't really want to do anything anymore. So it really, again, like what was used earlier, it's quite demoralizing. So you don't really want to do it again, right? Or sometimes like we get confused, we get overwhelmed by so many confusing decisions that we need to make, that we're kind of like in a choice paralysis. We're not really making a decision anymore. So what we want to do is remind ourselves to actually pause, take a step back, and just really reflect. Ask ourselves some questions instead of being consumed and overwhelmed by all of the feelings that we're going through and all of the what the situation is, right? So these questions I have, they're really just a sample of the many things you can do to reflect. This is not like, oh, a very strict list of what you need to ask yourself, but then it's really good to be able to use these as a guide if you feel like they would help you. So go ahead, feel free to like take note of it, take screenshots of it if you feel like that would be helpful for you. So the first, maybe it's important to ask ourselves, okay, what's the situation, right? Like what's happening, what's going on, just really taking a step back and trying to evaluate the environment. And then we ask ourselves how we're responding to it. Okay, how am I actually feeling this time? How do I feel? Really being able to label and acknowledge that emotion as well. And then maybe sometimes there are decisions that we need to make. So maybe it's important to ask ourselves, okay, what do I need? What do I actually want? And sometimes we can also ask ourselves, what do I value? Right? And then maybe sometimes there are situations where we feel like, okay, we're not really happy about this. So it requires us to actually ask ourselves, okay, what do I need to accept about the situation? And what do I need to change? So this whole concept of acceptance and change is actually a bigger thing we can like spend a full 30 minutes on. But just for like the interest of this talk, it's just simply asking ourselves, okay, when we're faced with something we don't really feel happy about, what about it do we need to accept? And what about it can we change? And then, in line with the change aspect, we can probably also ask ourselves, okay, what can I do to act on it? So, can we do to actually solve the issue, to work on the issue? And then, what we can do to take care of ourselves, being able to balance that as well. Maybe we can also ask ourselves, okay, what did I learn and how can I do better? So, really trying to be proactive here with trying to improve as well. So, really just very basic, right? Just asking ourselves some questions, but sometimes we forget that very basic aspect of reflecting. So, I have a few examples here that we can go through just to kind of like see how these questions can probably come about, or this process of reflection can go. So this is kind of a wordy table, but we'll go through each line one by one. So for example, the situation is you got rejected from a job, something that probably happens when we are applying for jobs, right? So how do you feel? Maybe you feel angry. So maybe you thought the interviewer was really nice to you, they made you feel like you were gonna get it, and then you still didn't get it, right? So maybe you feel a little angry about that, and kind of even betrayed, right? Maybe you feel a bit betrayed, and they were so nice to me, but then all of a sudden I still didn't get the job. So maybe just overall you're disappointed because you feel a little farther from getting a job. So, because this is a situation that we don't really maybe like, it's okay to feel that way, by the way. Those emotions are all normal to feel. So, it's fine for you to feel that way because it just seems valid given the situation. But then we don't want to stop there, right? We want to ask ourselves, okay, what do we need to accept about it? And what do I need to change? If there's really nothing we can do about the situation, maybe we can accept that we didn't get the job, right? If there's nothing you can actually do, and then to be able to change or feel like see what we can do about it, maybe we can say, you know what, I'll evaluate what I can improve for future applications. And then in line with that, we can ask ourselves, okay, what did I learn? How can I do better? Maybe specifically for this person, they say, okay, the writing sounds too general. Maybe they're writing their cover letters very generally. So maybe to improve, they want to make it more specific. So it's not just about learning, but actually making action steps. So what can I do to act on it? So maybe I can improve my cover letters, right? And then maybe this person is really dejected and very like betrayed still and disappointed. So you can ask yourself, okay, what can I do to take care of myself? I'm feeling really bad. So maybe I just want to be able to take a break for now, watch something, bake something, and then I'll apply again tomorrow. So as you can see, a rejection from a job didn't really end up with demotivation, with feeling too bad about yourself. You're still feeling what you need to feel, but then there's some proactive steps that happen because you really tried to reflect on it. Right. Another example is when, for example, you got an offer from a job. Okay, yay, finally, right? And then there's a good pay, but then all of a sudden, when they're talking about it, they really actually have high demands. So maybe they require you to work in the weekends or overtime. That's actually like an expectation from you. So how do you feel? Maybe you feel happy because you got an offer, but maybe you feel like there's that disappointment, that feeling of disappointment that you can't really shake. So it might be good to be able to assess and see, okay, maybe I'm confused because then I'm happy and then I'm also disappointed. So if there's a decision, maybe you can ask yourself some of the questions earlier, like what do I need and what do I want, right? So maybe this person needs financial stability and needs a stable job, but also a stable mind. And then what they want is flexible hours. And then when they look at it, you can also ask yourselves, okay, what do I value? Maybe I value work life balance. Maybe I value time for family and personal interests. So for this specific person, because the value of the time is really important, maybe what they will do is they have to say no to this job offer, right? And to take care of themselves, they'll just communicate it to the employer and then not really guilt themselves for that. Now, this is just an example. I'm not telling you to say no to everything with high demands, because for some people, when they reevaluate their values or their needs and wants, sometimes, for example, the financial stability goes is more valued or goes beyond the work life balance. So maybe the outcomes would be different, but as we can see, we're really trying to take into account different things so that you're really reflecting on it. Um, and taking the time to pause and really just be insightful about the things that you do. So very basic, but something to be able to remind us about in terms of its importance, just that aspect of reflecting and thinking, so that we don't just stop at our emotions that maybe tend to be negative, but we're actually coming out of it with proactive steps in both like dealing with the situation and also finding ways to take care of ourselves, right? So that's the first one, R, reflect. Now, the next one is E, which is evaluating our thoughts. So, when we are going through this job hunt, a lot of times there's different thoughts that come up, different anxiety provoking thoughts. That come up from the also anxiety provoking situation. So I have here a few examples of some of them. So the first one is, I am not good enough. I don't know if you felt this when you were rejected, but sometimes that thought kind of pops up sometimes, right? Next is, I will never find a job. So sometimes we feel like, okay, you know what, with the situation right now, I'll really never find a job. Next is, sometimes we feel like, you know what, I'm always failing. I'm such a failure. And another thought that we have is, you know what, I really I should get multiple offers. So these are some, this is not all of the thoughts. You probably have your own thoughts coming up as a result of this process. But these are some of the common kinds of thoughts that we tend to have. So the first one is actually, so when we look deeper into this is actually like what we call cognitive behavioral therapy. So these are what we call cognitive distortions, but I really won't get into that anymore because there's just a lot of like terms. But basically, for the first one, I am not good enough. That's a kind of like labeling or personalizing, where you're kind of, for example, when you experience a rejection, you blame yourself immediately and label yourself for it. And then the second one, we call this catastrophizing, wherein we actually feel like we'll never find a job. We imagine the worst possible case scenario. The third one is like black and white thinking. We feel like we're always failing based on one specific situation. And then the last one is a should. So I'll get more into that later, but that's what we call like the shoulds. Kind of thoughts. So to be able to evaluate these thoughts, we don't want to, cycle back to these thoughts when you're going through the job hunt, right? So there's actually specific, again, questions, a lot of questions to ask yourself, right? So ways to actually evaluate and challenge these negative thoughts. So again, feel free to take note, take a screenshot of these questions, but we'll show the examples of how to do that later as well. But some questions you can ask yourself to challenge it is, okay, is my thought based on feeling? Am I just feeling like I'm not good enough, or am I actually factually not good enough? Something like that. Next is, what evidence do you have for your thought? For example, what evidence do you have that you're always failing? And what evidence do you have against that thought that you're always failing? Again, this is kind of a complex thing that could actually take like months of sessions in therapy, but just to get the gist of it, this is what we can do to actually challenge your thoughts. Next is, are you jumping to conclusions without all the evidence? And then also another question to ask yourself is, what is another way you can look at this to be able to lessen the distress, right? So basically, what we're trying to do here is see that, the situation of the job hunt is already stressful enough. It's already anxiety provoking enough. But a lot of times, the thoughts that we have as a result of it even add to that anxiety and stress. So if we can't really change the situation, maybe we can see how we can challenge those thoughts that aren't necessarily helpful for us, or that are negative and actually kind of like self-critical. So to be able to do that, so I have the examples here of the alternate thoughts that we have, basically thinking of alternate thoughts that can lessen the distress. The first one is, I am not good enough, right? Example, we got that rejection, right? Sometimes we feel like, okay, we're not good enough. When we look at the alternate thought, we can try to think of it this way. You know what? My qualifications were not what they were looking for, but it doesn't mean I'm not good. So again, if you go back to what we said earlier, a lot of times the identity and work kind of goes like intertwined. So this is one way of deconstructing that tightly knit relationship of identity and work. So being able to say, you know what, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm not good, but maybe they really weren't looking for something else. So that kind of makes us feel a little better. It still kind of bums us out that we didn't get the job, but again, we're not trying to multiply the distress that we're already feeling by thinking negative thoughts, right? Next one, I will never find a job. So, an alternate thought could be it does seem that way right now, but I'm thinking of only the worst possible outcome. So, we're not really trying to deny reality here when we're trying to think of alternate thoughts. We can still acknowledge the reality of the situation that, it does seem that way right now. But if we think about it, that's just one option, that's just one outcome. And we're thinking of the worst possible one. Then maybe we can turn and see, okay, I'm doing what I can to have one. So, thinking that way kind of makes us have a little bit more hope and not so hopeless as it would be if we actually just stuck to the negative thought. Right now, as you can see, the alternate thoughts are a little longer, so it does really seem like we have to make a lot of thinking, a lot of like, trying to reconsider these negative thoughts. Now, the next one, a while ago, we said, I'm always failing. Sometimes when we're so dejected by something or really sad and down, we feel like that's always the situation, right? And then a while ago, we said, okay, let's ask ourselves some evidence about the situation or the thought. So we can say, I don't think this is accurate. I graduated from university or whatever else you think is an accomplishment for you personally. For example, I was part of this org, I did this project. I'm not technically always failing, right? So right now I'm unemployed and it doesn't feel great, but it doesn't mean I always fail. So again, we're not trying to push positive thinking here naman. We're trying to still see, we can still acknowledge that it doesn't feel great, but then it doesn't necessarily mean we always fail. So again, we're trying to lessen the distress by thinking about it in a different way and also checking for evidence because maybe it's not always the case. Last is I should get multiple offers. Now, this on the surface doesn't seem like it could be a negative thought, but this is actually what we call the shoulds. So, what happens because with the shoulds is we set such high expectations for ourselves that we're kind of like backed up in a corner. We have to do it. We're very, very pressured to do it. And then when we don't do it, we feel like a failure, right? And then we feel like we're not good enough. That's when the self-critical stuff come in after we don't reach expectations that we actually just set ourselves. So another way to look at it is maybe it would be nice to get multiple offers, but I'll focus on getting into a job I like instead of pressuring myself. So here we're not saying that you should like not have standards anymore. You should lessen your goals. Like by all means, it's really good to be able to strive high, do the best that you can. But maybe reconsidering as well if those shoulds, if those standards we're setting for ourselves are too constricting already to the point of distress. It might be good to remind ourselves to also be again kinder to ourselves by thinking in a different way. So, all in all, these evaluating of challenging thoughts is basically letting us think about our thoughts in a different way, just so that, the situation is stressful enough, right? We don't need our thoughts adding to that. So, if we can at least change the way we're thinking about it, maybe we'll have more mental capacity to actually deal with the job hunting anxiety, which is already, stressful enough. Right. So far we've talked about what we can do about our thoughts, like reflecting, evaluating our thoughts. Now we'll talk about what we can do behaviorally, right? So first is strategizing, or the third rather in the whole thing, and the first for behaviors is strategizing. So we don't want to just keep thinking and thinking. There's a lot of thinking going on. We actually want to do something, right? So strategizing basically means that we're taking action and being productive to effectively deal with the situation. So we move beyond just thinking and actually doing something. So this reminds us that similar to thoughts, there are actually things we can do to plan ahead and lessen the anxiety that we feel in an already anxiety provoking situation. So for example, one simple step that you probably already do but maybe would be nice to be reminded of is actually setting goals and breaking those goals down into steps. So just for example, like you have a goal, or maybe you don't have a goal yet, right? Sometimes it helps, like, okay, so overwhelming, what do I do? This job hunt is very, like, stressful. Maybe setting a goal would help kind of clarify your direction. You know what? I'll try to apply. Let's just give a random example. I'll try to apply for 10 jobs this week. Okay, there's a goal, there's a direction, right? Maybe that could lessen the anxiety. But then you feel like, oh, okay, ten jobs this week. Okay, can I really do that? Maybe some anxiety will come in again. So after setting goals, it's actually good to remind ourselves to break those goals down into steps. So for example, okay, 10 jobs this week. I have 5 days. Maybe I can do 2 jobs per day. Maybe I can do a job application in the morning and then in the afternoon. So if you think about it, like, okay, I'll do a job application this afternoon. That seems a lot more feasible, doable, less stressful compared to thinking, oh no, what do I do with this job hunt? I have 10 to do this week, right? So in our heads, we're kind of like convincing ourselves, okay, it's easier to actually break that down and see something that seems a bit more doable and feasible in terms of breaking that down into steps. Next is structuring and managing your time. So that's also part of it, right? Something as simple as having a Google Calendar or like a planner, lists would help lessen that anxiety that you feel just having that tool to organize things. So, for example, a specific thing that we can also do is giving ourselves time between the tasks. So maybe sometimes we're doing or we're creating anxiety provoking situations ourselves. So, for example, we have interviews, let's just say, and then we scheduled them at 1 and 1:30. Like that could probably add anxiety if we feel like, oh no, what if the 1 o'clock doesn't end soon? I might look bad for the 1:30 one. So that just produces a lot of anxiety. So maybe reminding ourselves to have time between tasks could help. So for example, instead of scheduling it that way, we can do something as scheduling it at 1 and then 3 or 2. So that, no, not 2, 2:30 maybe, just so that there's enough time to be able to rest, to prepare, to breathe in between, right? So simple things like that could help lessen the general anxiety of the job hunt. Of course, anticipating unexpected situations would also be good for us to do. For example, if you have the means to have maybe a backup internet or something like that, just in case that kind of happens and produces anxiety, that might also be a good way to strategize that as well. Also, in general, fighting the hurdles of perfectionism. So we talked about shoulds earlier. We talked about how things should be, and how that could be damaging sometimes. So same with that. Sometimes perfectionism and time management are at war with each other, because the more we want things to be perfect, the less we actually get it done already. So, again, being kinder to yourself, allowing yourself to be less than perfect, which doesn't really, exist anyway. So being able to do that could help us as well lessen that anxiety. Of course, we want to be able to also not just, set our time and set our goals, but also set boundaries. So boundaries, I feel like, can go both ways. So let's just give an example. Like, for example, you have an interview and then you feel like your family might be a little loud or busy. So sometimes you have to actually set that boundary and communicate to them, hey, I'm having an interview this time. Can you please give me like just some quiet time for this, like 30 minutes or 1 hour? So being able to do that lessens the anxiety, because you communicated it instead of worrying the whole time while you're in the interview that they will make noise, right? So sometimes it's good to set boundaries from possible distractions, but I think it's also good to go the other way. So setting boundary from too much job hunting is also good. We talked about that earlier, right? Like the feedback mechanism that happens when we try to do too much, it actually makes us just less emotionally healthy and then less able to dazzle interviewers. So sometimes it might be good to know when to stop, when to pause, when to, give ourselves a break, and set that boundary from too much job hunting as well. Of course, we're setting goals, structuring our time, setting boundaries. Part of strategizing is also staying connected with social support. So a lot of S's there under strategize to remember. But basically, that aspect of social support is also something important for us to include, because then, that's important not just for informational support, but also just like that moral, emotional support. That's why I'm really happy with groups like this with Liyab. I feel like it's a really good effort to stay connected. I mean, if I had this before, I feel like it would be a lot like less mentally stressful for me if you have peers going through the same thing, supporting each other. So that really helps a lot as well behaviorally. With managing the stress and anxiety, right? So far, I don't know if you've noticed, but there's a lot of work, right? Like taking care of our mental health is a lot of work, a lot of thinking, a lot of challenging and evaluating our thoughts, a lot of strategizing. So that, I feel like, is a good reminder that taking care of our mental health sometimes is a lot of work. Sometimes we associate it with, taking, watching the TV, or like watching Netflix rather, watching stuff like that, or like, going on a massage. So those are all part of mental health as well. But I think it's a good reminder that taking care of our mental health does require some work, but in the long run, it does help our overall well-being. So, of course, we don't want to take away that as well, that important aspect of mental health, of also taking a breath. So, we are thinking, we are reflecting, we are challenging our thoughts, we're strategizing, and then we can also take a breath, right? So you've probably heard this already before a couple of times, the saying that you can't pour from an empty cup. It's important to take care of yourself first. So again, similar to what we saw earlier in the feedback mechanism, sometimes when we're even doing too much job hunting, it prevents us from dazzling interviewers and impressing them because our mental health is not very good. So it's good to be able to take a breath, fill in ourselves, to be able to be re-energized, rejuvenated, to be able to apply again, right? The next day. So there's different ways that we can practice self-care, and we can go on and on about this. But basically, a few that I thought of, like core things that we can do to practice self-care, is, for one, there's a lot of thinking and planning and strategizing earlier. Might want to put that down and write that in a journal, right? So journaling all those thoughts, all those plans would be helpful to process some of the insights and thoughts that you gain. So really just being able to let it out there helps a lot by writing it down. Sometimes, maybe the anxiety is getting too much, so you need to seek professional help and actually talk about it to a professional. And there's different maybe means. Maybe it's through these groups like Liyab, maybe it's through career counselors, maybe it's actual like mental health professionals, psychologists that you need to talk to. So there's different forms of help. And, depending on what you need, you can also seek that and process that as well. Physical health is actually also part of taking care of our mental health. Like if you have like a stomach and headache, I feel like you won't really be in the right mood to apply or do something like that. So it would be good to also take care of our physical health, sleeping well, physical exercise like exercising, um, even like eating properly if you can, drinking vitamins, whatever it is that you can do to take care of your physical health also helps to be able to practice self-care. Aside from our bodies, we can also turn inward, practicing spirituality, gratitude, self-compassion. Those are also good ways to practice self-care. Whether you feel like turning to like your faith or spirituality helps. For gratitude, sometimes it actually helps to write three things you're grateful for a day. So that's like a very specific activity you can do. So it helps. It has been proven by a lot of like positive psychologists that writing three things you're grateful for every day actually improves mood. So, even though times are bleak and we're not really happy right now, just really finding, at least we have, I don't know, soap, at least we have tissue paper or internet or something random, like a bar of chocolate that I want. Those things can help improve our mood as well. And then self-compassion is also one, really being able to practice self-kindness, because a lot of times the job hunt can make us a little bit self-critical of ourselves. So being able to extend that kindness to ourselves also goes a long way. And of course, we want to be able to relax and do positive activities too, right? So, watch Netflix sometimes if you feel like that would help you cook, bake, knit, I don't know, listen to music, sing, dance, plants, taking care of your plants could also help. What else? There's so many different things, looking out, going outside and just seeing the sky, not so much outside, but, in the near outside, maybe in this time. It's not necessarily the most ideal, I guess, right now, given the pandemic, but there are things that we can do to still be able to relax and do positive activities. And, just in line with taking a breath, as I begin to close, something that I feel like is important as well is deep breathing, or like what we said, taking a breath. So deep breathing is super important for us because we don't necessarily need like a tool for that. We have our breath. It's very easy to access, it's very easy to do, but sometimes we forget that we can use that to actually relax, right? So sometimes we also, when we're anxious, we also feel like our breath gets shallow, like it's very chest kind of breathing when we're anxious. So when we talk about deep breathing, we're actually using our diaphragm. So your stomach should go big and like expand and like contract when you're deep breathing. So that's what we kind of want to be able to do. So again, it's through inhaling through your nose, holding it a bit, and then exhaling through your mouth, right? So I kind of actually want us to try that a little bit. I don't see you, but I'll trust that you'll try to do that exercise as well, just for like a minute or less. So if you could like make yourselves comfortable in a position, whether that's like sitting down on your chair, if you're here lying down, maybe hopefully not sleeping. So whatever it is, just find a comfortable position. And then again, I'll guide you through the exercise. So we'll do a few deep breaths. And then what I want you to do is like inhale, hold as long as you can, not to the point of like not being able to breathe anymore, and then exhaling through your mouth. So my God, okay. So I probably didn't breathe that deeply, but something like that. All right. So if you can close your eyes, if that's something that you're comfortable with as well, you can do that. So closing our eyes, I'll also join you and close my eyes. So try to relax, find a comfortable position as we do a quick breathing exercise today. All right. If you find some tension in your body, try to relax it as well as we do this deep breathing exercise. Right. So I want you to slowly inhale through your nose, hold, and exhale through your mouth. All right. Again, inhale and exhale. Trying to find a pace that's comfortable for you. Again, inhaling and exhaling. If you have thoughts bothering you, if you feel like you're not doing right, just keep focusing on how the breath feels as you inhale and exhale. Again, following how that air and the breath feels as you inhale through your nose, holding, and how it feels as you exhale through your mouth. Again, inhale and exhale. Try to allow the relaxation to spread from your breath to the different parts of your body as well. Again, inhale and exhale. We'll do two more. Inhale and exhale. Last one. Inhale and exhale. All right, you can open your eyes if you close it and gently go back to our talk. Hopefully none of you fell asleep with that. But basically that's a skill that you can use, when you're, for example, opening a text or like an email from an employer, from an interviewer or something like that, or you're about to submit something, it's very easy to use because it's already something you have, and it's something that you could use, as a way to just ground yourself and center yourself and relax yourself. So if that was helpful for you, or if you have any like feedback about that, again, feel free to comment that in the chat or in the comments below. So just to sum everything up that we talked about, first, of course, it's important for us to be able to take care of our mental health while we're going through this job anxiety. What do we do, right? Don't forget to rest. So reflect, again, thinking about things, pausing, evaluating and challenging those negative thoughts, strategizing, whether that's in time, boundaries, goals, and connections, and also taking a breath. So practicing self-care through many different ways that are, well-rounded. So if there's any of those that you feel like you could apply, feel free to, again, write down in the chat. You can interact with us on how you plan to take care of your mental health. If you're a job hunter, maybe if any of those spoke to you, or if any of those were applicable to you, feel free to go ahead and chat and write down below what you think you'd use. If there's any other ideas that you have that are beyond this as well, go ahead and write that down. But basically, that kind of sums up what what the tips I have are. So I do have my information here for emailing me if you have any specific concerns, and I also see clients still online therapy through those contact details. So yeah, hopefully you got something from that. Hopefully that was somehow helpful. And if you have questions, I'd love to answer that. We'd love to discuss that. So go ahead and write down in that chat as well. All right. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Aliana. I was taking so many notes, especially
Yeah.
what you said about. So there are a lot of things that I haven't encountered before, like what you said about like job search depression. That's a very interesting concept as well because I like I know it's a common feeling. Like a lot of the, for example, people in the support group do feel down with like the with the job hunt and everything. It's just that it's very hard to find the right words as well to describe what it is that we're feeling. So I'm also very grateful for the word cloud that you shared because some of those are really like, yeah, spot on. That's sort of how I feel like right now. And I feel like part of the struggle of like dealing with, you know, the job hunt anxiety and actually a lot of the different things that we're feeling is because it's so hard to
Right.
put the right words or the right label to what we're feeling. So thank you so much for the very educational talk. At least for me, it was very educational, and I appreciate the examples especially. Um, we do have a couple of questions actually already in the chat, and I do encourage everyone who's watching live right now, if you have any questions at all for Eliana, please put them in the comment section. But I wanted to start with like a question that I have first, because you did say something about you know, if we're not in the best state, really it's very hard to dazzle the interviewer. And
Right.
I feel like for all of the tips that you gave, they can be also like applied even way before like you get to the interview process. But
Hmm.
do you have any tips, I guess, for those who very specifically feel like interview anxiety, especially when they are in the interview themselves? Because like we can't really like, you know, stop ourselves in the middle of the interview and say,
Right.
wait, what
Right.
is happening, right? Do you have any tips for those who feel very specifically job interview anxiety?
Right. For one, I feel like it's very valid to feel interview anxiety because that can be one of the more nerve-wracking parts of the job hunt, right? Like application, you're on your own, although that does produce anxiety as well. So specifically, that maybe looking at that, maybe reflecting would be one. For example, what about the interview makes you anxious or nervous? Is it like talking to people? Is it the fact that you don't know the question? Is it the uncertainty? So sometimes reflecting on what about it makes it hard for you could guide us into what direction to take in terms of like trying to deal with that anxiety, right? And then we also said, Kanina, I'll use my framework as well because maybe we can use some of that. Evaluating thoughts, maybe. I think sometimes we think, okay, I will fail for sure. And like I will definitely like do a bad job at this. What if they think of me this way? Like sometimes we have those negative thoughts already before it even like happens. So sometimes challenging those thoughts, for example, you know what, I don't even know yet what they're really like experiencing or doing or thinking, so let's just go for it and deal with that and not really allow ourselves to be consumed by those negative thoughts. And then I guess with strategizing, for example, maybe sometimes some prep helps us to feel a little bit more secure. So if you feel like you want to study the company a little bit more and research about that to feel a little more prepared, or to practice, sometimes it even helps to practice. Like if you feel like you want to talk to someone, practice with a peer. If you could interview, I feel like you guys have like mock interviews, right? I saw that. Yeah, so like
Yes, we do.
using like going back to the connection, like using those kinds of tools to be able to practice that as well could probably help lessen the anxiety. And then taking a breath, you know, deep breathing before the interview happens, deep breathing even after the interview, and just being able to prepare for that. So I feel like we could, I didn't realize that we could also use the four of that for the interview anxiety. But yeah, if there's different ways that you could deal with that, maybe there those are some things that you could do. And of course, there's also a variety of other like grounding techniques that you could use to be able to feel a little more calm. Like sometimes people like talking to themselves in the mirror if that helps them, or like grounding techniques. Like I don't know if you've heard of the 5 4 3 2 1. That's something kind of being talked about in social media a lot. But basically, for example, if you're really anxious, like grounding yourself. Okay, what are 5 things I see? What are 4 things I hear? What are 3 things I can touch? What are 2 things I can smell? And what is 1 thing I can taste? So really being able to ground yourself, feel where you are, be mindful of your surroundings, your senses, so that you're not too consumed by the thoughts that you have. So yeah, those are some tips that could probably help with interview anxiety.
Yeah, thank you so much for Aliana. I feel like if we were to sum it up, it's all about being aware but also being present
Mm-hmm.
in where we are, especially with the interview, because I feel like a lot of us tend to overthink, especially when we are
Yeah.
in that situation and we get so overwhelmed, and now it's like, oh, I'm so
Right.
nervous already. So I think like even just taking a breath, even if it's like one breath before you answer
Right.
an interview question or while your interviewer is asking the question, right? Like a
Yeah.
deep breath just to be able to
Definitely.
ground yourself into this current situation.
Right. Right. Yeah.
All right. So we do have one question already in the chat. So it's from Nico, and he's asking, what are some of the legal issues to consider in dealing with accommodations of mental disabilities for a job applicant?
Okay. So I feel like this is a bit more of maybe I don't know if like AR from
Yeah,
yesterday
yeah.
has some input about this as well. So what I'm wondering what the legal like which part like the employer or the part of the applicant, right? But basically I feel like there's a lot involved because with like accommodating mental disabilities, and unfortunately like our country is not very advanced yet when it comes to actually accommodating for mental disabilities. But I think for one, you I feel like if I'm right with the mental health law, you have the right whether or not you want to disclose your disability, so that you have the right to that information. So if you feel like it would help you to actually disclose and they would accommodate you, that's actually something that's supposed to be done, like accommodations. If we're looking at the mental health law, they said that we have to provide. Okay, now I'm remembering the mental health law. They're saying that we have to provide accommodations and promotion like programs for mental health in general, and also accommodations specifically for mental disability. So I know that a lot of companies don't have that yet right now. They are starting, I hope and I think. um, but then it's up to you if you want to disclose that information. If you do disclose it, I feel like you are allowed or you have the right to ask for accommodation. So I think we're super behind on that for now. But like in terms of accommodations, I know that you have experience with Deirdre with like accommodations, right? Like for example, sometimes if you need to ask for an extra break or an extra like day just to be able to see a therapist, sometimes they even fund your therapy sessions or things like that. Those are things that you are able to ask and able to do. If not, that's actually not, that's already going against the mental health law, and that's actually kind of like a form of discrimination na rin. So parang it's up to you if you want to share, and then you do have the right. So I guess to your information and what you disclose, you also have the right to certain accommodations as well. Now, I guess as a job applicant, I'm not really sure how it is here. Maybe you can also talk about the HR perspective from here, because from my experiences, most of my job hunt experiences have been in the States, and you're actually supposed to say it. I mean, you can say it, you declare if you have it or not. You can choose not to declare it, but they never use that information against you. For the most part, they use it as a way to provide accommodations for you, because they specifically have like accommodation, disability, inclusive offices for that. So that, I don't know if that answers your question, but there are a lot of legal issues, I guess, with like privacy, confidentiality, and just like the ability to give accommodations. That tends to be kind of like the hazy and like blurred kind of like issues there. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything from the HR perspective as well from that.
Well, for just to add, right, like yesterday, what AR said,
Mm-hmm.
the sad part is a lot of the accommodations are being done for employees. So that means
Right.
if you are employed already, then the company is sort of like mandated to provide those accommodations for you. But there's um, rarely, I don't think there's anything there that very specifically talks about job applications. So
Right.
that one I'm a bit more cautious about, because as an employee, of course, you're really entitled for your company to take care of you. But
Mm-hmm.
as a job applicant, especially, with what you said, that there's still a long way to go for well the entire country to get
Right.
into, being able to. I think like the awareness part we're there, but accommodating
Mm-hmm.
part, I think we do still have a long way to go. So if a company usually is not really prepared to accommodate an applicant
Mm-hmm.
that does have, like, for example, mental illness, that sort of thing, then I'd be a bit more cautious. I think
Right.
it's really because, like, culturally,
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like we're there yet. Like what AR mentioned yesterday, even if like it's in the law, but if it's not really
Mm-hmm.
imposed, then it's really merely a suggestion.
Right.
And that's the sad part here. I guess, like, if you're asking if like there would be, I mean, in terms of like the word that you used, right, like legal issues, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of whether your company will take it against you if you did not disclose that you were going through, like, that you do have mental illness or something like that. I'd go back to what Aliana mentioned, that you do have the right to your information, and you have, the option to disclose that or not. But yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
have to add on the topic.
It's a bit of a tricky yeah, topic. Yeah.
Yeah, like honestly, if only I could speak for the whole, like, for all HR
Yeah.
professionals in the Philippines, I want to be able to say that, we don't discriminate
Right.
for job applicants with mental illness, but I can't speak for everyone. I can't speak for
Yeah.
every company. Ideally, we'd
Mm-hmm.
want to get there
Mm-hmm.
small steps.
Right. Yeah.
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 All right. Yeah, everyone who's tuned in, if you have more questions, please comment that. So we'll just be waiting for those questions. I actually have another question for Eliana in the meantime,
Mm-hmm.
because I guess in the context of, especially me as, well, the founder of Liyab, and we're really trying to be as supportive as we can about this.
Right.
Are the rest practices, I guess, best if you do that, like, okay, reflect on my own, evaluate the thoughts on my own, or would it be better if I had like a buddy to help
Mm-hmm.
me, talk through like my reflection points and my thoughts, or help me strategize,
Mm-hmm.
that sort of thing. And I guess, like, if it's helpful to have that sort of buddy when doing the rest, what should I look for in a buddy?
Okay, yeah. I feel like that's a good question. I feel like a buddy would be really nice. Like it would be very helpful. It's less isolating. Like we said earlier, the job hunt anxiety could really be isolating. So having someone walk with you, go with you through the process of reflecting, and like just throwing off those ideas, right, to people. I feel like if it's all in your head, it feels like it might be a bit overwhelming and too much. But having that outlet, having someone to go with you, communicate with you, could really help. And I think in terms of like a buddy to look for, I feel like it depends as well what you might benefit from. So of course we want someone that would be empathizing, like that would have empathy to you, understand your situation, be able to maybe be available for you, be able to listen to you, and be able to validate your experiences as well. We don't really want someone that's invalidating. So basically we want someone that would accept you and really see things from your perspective. And I think in terms of like just personality fit, those might also contribute. Because for example, what if you're an introvert? Maybe you can benefit from someone that has had maybe experiences with introvert or is an introvert as well. Or I don't know, maybe there's also benefits if it's an extrovert, because then you kind of bounce off with each other's different personality types, right? So it's really about, I guess we can go back to the reflect, right? Like what do you need? What do you want? What are you looking for specifically on an individual basis? Are there values that you feel, do you want to have the same mindset or values when it comes to work, so that you can throw off ideas of each other, right? So really a lot of different things to consider, personality wise, mindset wise, like behavior wise when it comes to listening, behavior, yeah, different things to look at really when it comes to finding an effective buddy for yourself. But again, it requires a lot of reflection on what might work for you personally.
Actually, so I'm very curious about this. Like, this is all out of
Yeah.
curiosity now. So, just to share, Aliana, a while back we did a poll in our career
Mhm.
support group, asking, like, I asked people, "Are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert?" And
Right.
so many people in the group are introverts. And I don't know
Ooh,
if that's
okay.
like a function of like maybe a lot of the introverts just decided to like go into the career support group because
Okay.
they're introverts, and maybe the
Right.
extroverts have like their friends and everything. But I'm curious if like being an introvert makes us, I guess, more prone to feeling like job hunt anxiety and all of the other like feelings that you've discussed. And are there I guess like tips specifically for introverts to help us get over or take care of ourselves, actually in general, take care of ourselves?
Right. So I don't really have any research to point at that shows, for example, that the job hunt is a little harder for introverts because I feel like, well, I guess it depends also what kind of jobs they're hunting, what kind of field they're in. But because we can have like really outspoken introverts naman or like kind of loud introverts. Introversion is really about that energy management, right? Like where a lot of times too much social energy, too much stimulus could be kind of draining for someone. So maybe the triggers are a little different and the ways to rest are a little different. But in general, I don't necessarily think it's a little harder naman for introverts. Maybe what is required of you, if it's really an outspoken kind of like extroverted community, maybe it's that fit that gets hard when you're trying to kind of like adapt or apply for that job where it's a bit different from your personality style. But I guess in general, like as a self-care tip, being able to take care of yourselves, managing, I guess, like what you said earlier, starting with that awareness, right? Starting with knowing the present, where you're trying to see, okay, how are my energy levels right now? Like you can even use ratings, or if you have your own codes, like, okay, I'm like depleted right now, or I'm like, I think like some of my clients told me about like spoons or something, like I'm out of spoons, or like it's something like that. Yeah. Um, so they use that just to be able to verbalize as well that what, I'm like my energy's done, I'm not really good already, I need to take a break. Or maybe also like if you don't need to communicate that, if it's just with yourself, like knowing, okay, you know what, I'm at an 80 right now in my introversion, and all of that. So maybe we can like take a step back and like maybe we don't maybe we need a day where we don't schedule interviews and not really talk to people, for example on Zoom, just to be able to take that breather. So really managing your energy levels, assessing yourself, and doing the necessary steps to act on that could probably be helpful as well.
I love that you mentioned the spoons because it's a
Yeah.
concept I'm familiar with, actually. And then like one of the examples I remember with encountering, I don't know what it's officially called, spoon theory,
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
um but it's all about like if you have a limited number of spoons as well, you want to be
Hmm.
able to spend the spoons on the activities that would give you a net positive of spoons. So I
Right.
the first time I encountered this theory was actually, or this concept was in relation to job hunting as well. Like
Okay. Yeah.
if it's, like if you have like 5 spoons for the day, and
Hmm.
perhaps like, like other activities, for example, like doing your chores, would take
Hmm.
like 3 spoons, 2 spoons, and then you'd be depleted already, right?
Right. Right.
And so it's all about also prioritizing what you spend your spoons on, because like
Hmm.
sure, that chore will take you 3 spoons, but applying for a job will take you like 5 spoons. But you
Right.
know that once you land the job, it'll allow you to get more spoons for yourself. Then
Yeah.
you'd want to sort of prioritize the activities that give you a net positive
Right. Right.
spoons. I don't know if I truly understood that correctly, but it was
Right.
just in
Yeah.
that concept that I encountered, in that context that
Yeah.
I encountered the whole idea with the
Spoons.
spoons. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I actually didn't hear about it. It was just like my clients that told me about it. Like, okay, cool that you guys use that. And they said it's more of like a Gen Z thing, I guess, that they actually use that to each other. So I'm like, okay, great. You have like that language that you communicate to each other as well, about energy levels. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't know nga why it's spoons, but yeah,
Right. Yeah. It feels a
I
little
found that
random, right?
weird.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Now I want to research on why it's spoons, right? It could be anything else. But yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I'm not seeing any new questions in the comments. But for those who are watching this right now, or if like you were in class or you were busy with something during this live session and you're able to watch the video after this live and you still have questions, go ahead and comment that. I mean, Aliana is part of the group, and
Yeah.
if ever like I could, be the bridge and ask her about something that you left in the comments, just to really be able to have this conversation. Because again, if you're not aware, October is Mental Health Awareness Month. I was talking to Aliana earlier. This is like the third talk she's doing this week on mental health awareness. But I think it's really great because we wanna be able to talk about this. We want to be able to talk about this in order for us, I guess, to in relation to the question that we got, right? Awareness is like the first step, and making the accommodations could
Right.
be the next. But we really have to keep talking about it, and we have to be more aware of the different concepts as well. So educating ourselves, like for me, for example, I've learned so much from Aliana's talk today, and I feel like that allowed me to move forward with my own knowledge of mental health as well. So it's all about also, just like going into like, not like full research the way that Aliana would do it, because of course she's a
Right.
psychologist, so she can do that, right? But just being able to get a bit more knowledge about the topic, so that we can assess ourselves further and be more aware of where we're at when it comes to mental health. So thank you so much, Aliana, for
Thank you
being with
so
us
much.
today.
Yeah.
And really really grateful for, like, the framework, like rest, that's gonna
Mhm.
stick with me forever, I think. And hopefully the rest of our audience. So thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who tuned in live. So today was day 2 of TMI, our series of talks on mental health. Tomorrow is the last day, and we have um, Jamie Flores, who is also a mental health advocate, and she will talk specifically about managing school and stress. So that's our topic for tomorrow, and hopefully, well, it's Saturday tomorrow, so hopefully, not a lot of things piling up in terms of like schoolwork, and that you'll be able to tune in live. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Thanks, Aliana. Thanks to
Thank
our
you.
audience.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.